Good evening, dear listener. Tonight, before you drift off to dreams of romance and candlelit ballrooms, let me tell you a story that may make you think twice about kissing anyone even in your sleep. Because once upon a time, in the candlelit world of the 1500s, a kiss wasn't just a sign of love or affection. No, it was something far more dangerous. It could mark the beginning of a scandal, a duel, a disease, or even your death. Yes, you heard that right. In the 16th century, kissing was practically a contact sport with real casualties. The next time you're watching a historical drama and the nobleman leans in to press his lips to his lady's hand, or, heaven forbid, her lips remember that kiss came with risks. Not only was it socially explosive, it was medically reckless, legally questionable, and sometimes even politically fatal. Let's set the scene. Europe in the 1500s. There are no toothbrushes, no antibiotics. People bathe once every time the Pope changes his hat. The average noble's mouth is a bustling colony of bacteria, and the average peasant's teeth are, well, missing. Add in rampant outbreaks of the plague, the mysterious and always fashionable sweating sickness, and a new arrival on the scene called syphilis, and suddenly, pressing your mouth to someone else's sounds less like affection and more like a death wish. But the danger wasn't just in germs. No, the kiss in this era was loaded with meaning. To kiss someone was to risk much more than infection. You could be risking your entire future. You see, in many parts of Europe, especially among the lower classes, a kiss could be interpreted as a binding promise, a sort of mouth-written contract. There are court records of young women suing men for breach of promise after a kiss led nowhere. "He kissed me," they said, "and now I'm ruined." And the courts often agreed. So if you thought ghosting someone in the 21st century was messy, try doing it in 1583 after you dared to lean in for a smooch behind the grain cart. And then there's the matter of sin. The church, always keen to keep everyone's lips pursed tightly in prayer, was not fond of kissing, especially among the unmarried. In some cities, public displays of affection were outright banned. A kiss in the wrong place at the wrong time could land you in front of a bishop, a magistrate, or worse, your mother. Forget romantic rendezvous. This was a time when passion needed paperwork. Even among the elite, kissing was treacherous. In royal courts, kisses weren't necessarily romantic. They were ceremonial, symbolic, and occasionally lethal. One wrong kiss, offered to the wrong noblewoman, could be seen as an affront to her honor or a challenge to her husband. That's how duels started. Sometimes, they ended in blood. Sometimes, they ended in very uncomfortable family dinners. And speaking of poison, did I mention that kissing could literally kill you? There are tales, possibly exaggerated, but disturbingly persistent, of assassins smuggling toxins into their mouths, using the intimacy of a kiss to deliver the fatal dose. It's not exactly the kind of kiss of death you'd expect from a fairy tale. Even cosmetics played a deadly role. Lipsticks of the era were occasionally made with white lead or mercury-based compounds. Think about that the next time you pucker up for your partner. If your lips looked fabulous in the 1500s, there was a decent chance they were slowly poisoning you and possibly anyone you happened to kiss. So, let's imagine for a moment you, sitting beside a candlelit hearth in your best velvet doublet or brocade gown, leaning towards someone who smells faintly of cloves, wood smoke, and decay. You feel the tension rise. Your hearts beat faster. You close your eyes. You kiss. And in that moment, You may have just ruined your reputation, invited a duel, spread a plague, offended God, entered into a legally binding relationship, or accidentally ingested mercury. Sleep well. So now you know kissing in the 1500s wasn't just about stolen moments in moonlit gardens or poetry whispered under balconies. It was, quite literally, a high-stakes gamble. But tonight, let's dig deeper into one of the most astonishing truths of that era. A kiss could lock you into a marriage. Permanently. No priest. No parchment. Just lips. Yes, in some parts of Renaissance Europe, a kiss was considered binding, as in congratulations. You are now practically married because your faces touched for 3 seconds behind the alehouse. The legal term, per verba de presenti. A fancy Latin phrase that basically means you spoke or kissed like you meant it. And once you'd done that, especially in front of witnesses, you were expected to follow through. You might be wondering who exactly decided that something as soft and fleeting as a kiss should carry the weight of a marital vow. The answer, as with most terrible decisions in history, is a combination of church authorities, local magistrates, and a whole lot of nervous men with daughters. Because reputation was everything. If a young woman was seen kissing a man even on the cheek, it was assumed something else might have happened, too. And since the patriarchy is nothing if not efficient at weaponizing virtue, that assumption could ruin a woman's future. So the courts, in all their justice, would step in and say, "You kissed her. Guess what, buddy? You're now her husband. Forever." Of course, this worked both ways. There are actual legal cases where women dragged men to court, not for money, not for revenge, but to enforce the kiss. One German case from the 1570s features a man who was forced into marriage because he had touched the maid's lips at a church festival and then denied her affection. That's right, denied her affection. The judge, presumably while rolling his eyes and sharpening his quill, ruled that the kiss constituted intent, and intent meant obligation. You could imagine the awkward wedding feast. But here's where things get even stranger. Because sometimes, it wasn't just about the kiss itself. It was about the kiss plus words. If someone said, "I love you," or "I take you to be my wife," or heaven forbid called someone my dearest before leaning in for a kiss, that was as good as a wedding vow. Congratulations. You're now locked into a lifelong partnership with a person who may have had onions for breakfast and no concept of bathing. Naturally, this led to some creative maneuvering. Young men might claim they were drunk and didn't mean the kiss. Others said they were joking or practicing for the real thing. Some men argued that the kiss happened in a dream. That defense did not hold up well in court. And for women, denying the kiss could mean being branded as a liar, a temptress, or worse, unchaste. In a world where marriage meant money, alliances, dowries, and land, a kiss wasn't just a kiss. It was a transaction, a chess move, a legal document sealed with saliva. And of course, there were the fake kisses, elaborate performances designed to look romantic without triggering legal implications. In some areas, noble families even had chaperoned kissing rituals where participants were allowed to kiss once, very publicly, to avoid suspicion later. Because as ridiculous as it sounds, it was safer to kiss someone in front of 40 people than to sneak a quick peck behind a curtain and end up legally hitched by next Tuesday. Imagine the anxiety. Imagine being a teenager in the 1500s with no toothbrush, no privacy, and the knowledge that one clumsy kiss could tie your life to someone forever. It gives a whole new meaning to going steady. So, tonight, as you drift toward dreams of candlelight and courtship, remember this: back then, you didn't need a wedding planner or a bouquet or a priest. You just needed to lean in a little too far. And suddenly, your lips wrote checks the rest of your life had to cash. Sleep tight. You're lying there, cozy under your blanket, probably thinking, okay, kissing could get you married in the 1500s. Weird, but manageable. But what if I told you that was the least of your worries? Because now, dear listener, we need to talk about the plague. Not metaphorically, not poetically. I mean actual, blackening, lymph node bursting plague, the kind that traveled through towns like a bad rumor and turned your average village into a ghost story. And the terrifying part: one innocent kiss could be all it took. Yes, we're talking about the 1500s, a time when physicians still thought sneezing was caused by demons and bloodletting was a first aid technique. In this world, germs weren't understood. Hygiene was laughable. And you were lucky if your barber didn't double as your surgeon. So, imagine you're a well-meaning 16th century peasant. You lean in to kiss your betrothed, who just returned from a crowded marketplace, and within days, you're coughing up blood. Your skin is mottled with purple blotches, and your neighbors are throwing herbs at your door and lighting candles for your soul. And it wasn't just the Black Death. That's the headline plague. Yes, but it was the understudies you really had to watch. Like the sweating sickness, a mysterious and terrifying illness that could kill you within 24 hours. It was especially polite. It preferred the wealthy, the fashionable, the young, and it spread through touch, breath, and yes, kissing. It gets worse. People in the 1500s believed that sickness could be passed through miasma, bad air. So if you got too close to someone reeking of disease, and trust me, everyone reeked of something, you could inhale their illness right into your soul. Imagine trying to steal a romantic kiss under the stars, only to get a face full of someone's plague-laced breath and a one-way ticket to medieval hospice care. This wasn't paranoia, it was math. Epidemics swept through Europe in terrifying waves. Entire towns were emptied. Graves were dug in batches. Family members wouldn't kiss their own children goodbye because death, in this century, didn't knock. It barged in with a cough and a fever. Which is why people got weird about intimacy. Even royalty. Monarchs gave up hand kissing in favor of awkward nods. Affection became a luxury item. Hugs suspicious. Cheek kisses reckless. A full-on lip-to-lip kiss that was a flex. A show of trust so intense it might as well have been an act of war. You might think surely people got used to it. Nope. There are accounts from plague diaries, yes. Those exist where people describe witnessing kisses and gasping as if they'd just seen someone stick their tongue in a bear trap. That's how dangerous it felt. And if you were particularly unlucky, you might end up in a kissing chain. Imagine someone kisses someone who kissed someone who kissed someone with the plague. That's like kissing death's business card. To be fair, some people tried to mitigate the risk. Perfumed handkerchiefs, herbal pouches worn around the neck, long wooden noses stuffed with spices. Hello. Plague doctors, these were the medieval equivalents of wearing a mask in public. But none of it made kissing safer. It just made it smell better. And just when you think it couldn't possibly get any grimmer, well, here comes syphilis. The French disease, the Great Pox. The gift that keeps on giving, this little microbial nightmare, made its European debut right around the late 1400s and immediately started destroying lives, faces, and reputations. And while it's mostly known as a sexually transmitted infection, there were plenty of physicians who suspected it could spread by kissing, especially during its early, oozing, feverish phase. You know, the romantic part. So yes, if you kiss the wrong person, you might not just end up married, you might end up melting. And yet, people still did it. Because humans are stubborn, affectionate, foolish creatures. Even in the face of swelling buboes and pustules and 100-degree fevers, some lovers couldn't help themselves. They kissed anyway. They risked it all for love, for lust, for the brief illusion that tomorrow wasn't crawling with rats and rumors. And maybe that's what's most beautiful and tragic about it. Because a kiss in the 1500s wasn't casual. It was an act of faith, a gamble, a whispered rebellion against the ever-present shadow of death. So tonight, if you're drifting to sleep next to someone you love, maybe give them a kiss. You probably won't catch the plague. Probably. Now that you're safely tucked under your blanket, hopefully not too paranoid about kissing ever again, let's turn our attention to something a little closer to home, or rather, closer to the mouth. Because long before the dangers of the plague or marriage by kiss took center stage, people in the 1500s had to contend with a much more intimate horror: each other's breath. Yes, dear listener, bad breath. But not just the kind that comes from too much garlic or forgetting to floss. We're talking about a full-on, biochemical war zone inside the average 16th century mouth, a damp, fetid place of rot, infection, and unregulated mystery. Let's begin with the obvious: there was no toothpaste. Or rather, there was, but it came in the form of crushed bone, burnt eggshells, salt, vinegar, charcoal, or if you were particularly unlucky, ground brick. That's right, brick. You were essentially scrubbing your gums with a tiny demolition site and hoping for the best. Toothbrushes still experimental. Some people used chewed twigs. Others used linen cloths wrapped around a finger. And many, far too many, used nothing at all. Now, if you were rich, you might have access to an early form of mouthwash. It usually contained wine, herbs, and occasionally a dash of mercury or urine. Swish, spit, and pray to Saint Apollonia, the patron saint of dentistry and possibly dry heaving. The results predictably tragic. Teeth were blackened, crooked, and often absent altogether. Gums were swollen, infected, and prone to bleeding with the gentlest touch. The wealthy might have had the money for sweetmeats and imported sugar, but ironically, that made things worse. Sugar was a new and thrilling substance in Europe, and no one yet knew what it did to teeth. Spoiler, it did everything terrible. Imagine kissing someone with two visible teeth, both of which are wobbling like old fence posts, while the rest of their mouth smells like warm meat left out in the sun. You lean in, and the odor hits you before the lips do a sickly mix of rotting enamel, undigested lamb, and despair. But that's not all. Dentistry in the 1500s was more of a guessing game than a science. Most dental work was done by barbers, or if you were desperate, blacksmiths. Tooth extractions were performed with forceps, prayers, and zero anesthesia. Occasionally, the whole jaw went with it. And then there were the clever, cursed inventions, like tooth powders laced with nitric acid that stripped enamel and created a nice, polished hole. Or ivory dentures made from animal bone that fit about as comfortably as a marble in a boot. Or mouth fresheners consisting of dried flowers sewn into fabric and held between your cheeks, which only worked if your problem was not smelling enough like dead lavender and bile. Still not convinced that kissing in this era was an act of war? Let's talk oral infections. There was no concept of bacteria, no penicillin, no antiseptics. A single infected tooth could and often did lead to death by sepsis. You'd get a fever, your face would swell, and unless someone lanced your jaw with a red-hot poker, you were on a fast cart to the cemetery. And people knew this. They feared it, which made kissing less of an instinct and more of an assessment. Before a kiss, you didn't just lean in. You observed. You noted color, breath, lip sores, the angle of decay. You evaluated whether this particular moment of affection was worth spending eternity in a wooden box under the churchyard yew tree. Some took precautions, chewing cloves, mint leaves, or anise seeds to mask odors. But these were temporary fixes like spraying perfume on a compost heap. The core issue remained mouths in the 1500s were mysteries best left unopened. And yet, they were opened. Because for all the disease, for all the filth, for all the risk, you know what people did. They still kissed. They did it in shadows, in alleyways, at harvest festivals, between tankards of ale and plumes of pipe smoke, in the cold stone corridors of castles, and the mossy backyards of peasant cottages. They kissed despite the danger, or maybe because of it. Maybe there's something beautifully absurd about the human willingness to press lips together, even when the consequences are heartbreak, plague, or halitosis from the ninth circle of hell. So tonight, if you brushed your teeth before bed, know that you're living a life of unimaginable luxury by 1500 standards. And if someone offers you a kiss in your dreams, make sure they don't smell like spoiled goat cheese and powdered brick. Just in case, you've survived plague kisses, marriage kisses, and breath so foul it could haunt a cathedral. But tonight, dear listener, we turn to a quieter kind of danger, something seductive, shimmering, and stored in the vanity drawers of noblewomen across Renaissance Europe. Lipstick. Or rather, its early ancestor, lip color, lip rouge, lip stain, whatever they called it back then. It wasn't sold in shiny plastic tubes or flavored with strawberry. It was homemade, thick as wax, and beautiful to behold. But there was just one problem. It could kill you. Yes, in the 1500s, kissing a woman wearing lipstick wasn't just risky because of society or disease. It was risky because her cosmetics might be laced with lead, mercury, or arsenic. Which means you weren't just admiring her lips. You were flirting with poison. Let's begin with the science, what little there was of it. Cosmetics during this time were about appearance, not safety. There were no regulations, no ingredient lists, no warnings in tiny Latin script. Beauty was an alchemical experiment, and women's faces were the test subjects. To get that perfect crimson hue, some formulas relied on crushed cochineal insects, not so bad. Cinnabar mercury sulfide, slightly worse, or red lead, extremely bad. Thank you. Some lip mixtures even contained white lead as a base, giving the rest of the face that fashionable pale, ghostly look, while the lips stood out like a velvet warning sign. And the thing about lead, it doesn't leave your body. It builds. Slowly, quietly. First, your gums darken, your teeth ache, your stomach turns. Then come the tremors, the hallucinations, the memory loss, eventually death, though not before a great deal of drooling and personal discomfort. And Mercury, that came with its own grab bag of horror's mood swings, skin eruptions, and what 16th century physicians gently described as melancholy madness. There's a decent chance many of the court ladies described as sensitive or prone to outbursts were just poisoning themselves daily in pursuit of fashion. So you might be wondering, did anyone know? Sort of. There were whispers. Philosophers raised eyebrows. Apothecaries coughed meaningfully. But beauty was status. A painted face meant wealth, control, sophistication, and much like modern trends that involve sticking needles into your forehead or taping your mouth shut at night, it continued precisely because it was dangerous. Now, imagine you're a dashing courtier, leaning in to kiss a lady's hand. Her lips are stained deep crimson, her cheeks powdered pale. You think, how elegant, how alluring. And then contact. A brush of your mouth against her glove. Maybe the faintest touch near her cheek. Hours later, you're dizzy. Your tongue feels heavy. You can't remember how many fingers you're holding up. Congratulations. That kiss just came with a dose of accidental neurotoxins. Of course, some rumors suggest not all poisoned kisses were accidents. The Renaissance had its fair share of intrigue. Assassination was an art form, and it wasn't unheard of for lipsticks to be intentionally dosed with fatal ingredients, especially if a noblewoman needed to dispose of a lover, a rival, or an inconvenient husband. Some women were said to coat their lips with toxin-laced balms, giving one last kiss before letting nature and chemistry take its course. These tales are rare, half legend, and mostly whispered by men who couldn't believe a woman might just choose to leave them. But they add to the mythology, the kiss of death. Quite literally. Lipstick became a symbol not just of beauty, but of power, of danger, of defiance. To wear red lips in public, when so many men demanded modesty and self-erasure, was a kind of rebellion. And rebellion, like red lead, can be hard on the nerves. And so, the kiss was transformed once again. No longer just a gesture of love, or a legal promise, or a biological threat, it was now a chemical gamble. An intimacy laced with vanity and danger, with rouge and ruin. You might say it was the ultimate Renaissance metaphor, beautiful, intoxicating, and just a little bit cursed. So tonight, if you happen to dream of a woman in a velvet gown with lips like crushed rubies, think twice before leaning in. If she kisses you, you may not wake up. Or worse, you might wake up in 1500s Venice with a headache, a fever, and a sudden craving for lead-based face cream. Now that we've explored the poisonous pouts and death-laced kisses of Renaissance beauty, you may be wondering, what did the church have to say about all this lip-locking? Spoiler alert, they were not fans. Tonight, let's peel back the incense-heavy veil of 16th century morality and explore how a simple kiss could not only doom your body, but your soul. To begin with, in the 1500s, religion wasn't a Sunday morning activity. It was the air people breathed, the structure of your life, your laws, your afterlife insurance policy. And the church, whether Catholic or increasingly Protestant depending on the decade and the country, had very strong opinions about what your lips should and should not be doing. Should they be reciting scripture? Yes. Kissing someone outside of marriage? Absolutely not. Kissing someone inside marriage? Only if absolutely necessary. You think I'm exaggerating? In many regions, especially during times of moral panic or plague, public kissing was punishable by law, not just frowned upon, fined, banned, surveillance level frowned upon. Couples caught kissing in public might be dragged before a magistrate, fined, publicly shamed, or even locked in stocks. And these weren't just passionate lovers either. Sometimes even a chaste peck on the cheek between married couples could be considered unseemly. Because you see, the body was a dangerous thing. It tempted, it sinned, it ruined your immortal soul unless you kept it in check with prayer, fasting, and the kind of clothing that made everyone look vaguely like a furniture cover. And the mouth, oh, the mouth was doubly cursed. It was a tool of temptation and transgression. You spoke lies with it. You whispered secrets. You kissed, sometimes out of lust. And don't even get the priest started on French kissing, which wasn't called that, of course, but would have gotten you branded as dangerously immoral or, if unlucky, possessed. Certain sermons of the era went into unsettling detail about what kissing could lead to, and what it could lead to, inevitably, was damnation, fire, brimstone, possibly boils. At the very least, a stern talking to from your village priest and 50 Ave Marias. And the targets of this wrath mostly women, naturally. If a man kissed too much, he was enthusiastic. But if a woman did it, she was a harlot, a Jezebel, a walking cautionary tale. Entire pamphlets were printed condemning the painted women who lured good Christian men into sin with one touch of their perfumed lips. There were even modesty manuals for young women, advising them on how to avoid the dangers of male attention. Rule #1, do not smile too much. Rule #2, never be alone with a man. Rule #3, if he tries to kiss you, scream "God save me" and run. No, really. That was actual advice. So where could people kiss? Technically, nowhere. Certainly not at church, not in public squares, not near a window. Definitely not behind the stables unless you wanted to be the subject of next Sunday's homily and at least 3 anonymous poems nailed to your door. And yet people still kissed. Because people are stubborn and curious, and sometimes very bad at following religious rules. Secret kissing spots developed, behind tapestries, in empty pews after midnight mass, in the dark corners of taverns, where priests were less likely to visit and more likely to be part of the problem. There were whole subcultures of whispered affection lovers who learned to express intimacy through letters, glances, or brief, stolen kisses beneath the moon. The risk made it romantic, because what is forbidden is always sweeter, especially when you're told it might doom you forever. And even the church knew it couldn't truly stop kissing, so it tried to redirect it. Holy kisses, they called them. Ritualized. Symbolic pecks between brothers and sisters in Christ, performed in very specific ways to avoid scandal. These weren't romantic. They were supposed to be spiritual and deeply awkward. But everyone knew the difference between a holy kiss and a real one. A real kiss had heat and consequence, and shame trailing behind it like incense smoke. So tonight, as you drift to sleep under soft sheets and distant stars, be thankful you don't live in a time when kissing was a punishable sin. And if you dream of kissing someone in the candlelit shadows of a medieval chapel, remember to scream "God save me" afterward. Just to be safe, let's leave the peasants and the preachers behind for a moment and rise up figuratively, and in social rank to the shimmering, gold-laced world of kings and queens. Because if you thought kissing was dangerous for the common folk, you haven't seen what happened when royalty decided to pucker up. Tonight, dear listener, let me take you into the candlelit corridors of European courts, where every gesture carried weight, every word was measured, and a single misplaced kiss could unmake an alliance or ignite a war. At court, nothing was casual. Not your glance, not your handshake, and certainly not your kiss. In the 1500s, a kiss between nobles was rarely about love. It was a tool, a symbol, a highly choreographed ritual that could determine the fate of kingdoms. To begin with, the rules of courtly kissing were as strict and layered as a noblewoman's gown. There were cheek kisses, hand kisses, robe kisses, ring kisses, and in very rare cases, lip kisses, each with their own political meaning. A kiss on the hand, a sign of respect. A kiss on the cheek, friendly, but tread carefully. A kiss on the lips, dangerous territory. And heaven help you if you kiss the wrong person. One such cautionary tale belongs to a young nobleman, let's call him Lord Overconfident, who, upon meeting a visiting princess from Spain, greeted her with a kiss that was just a little too warm, a little too lingering. Within days, there were whispers of an understanding between them, and before either party could clarify, a marriage negotiation was on the table, followed by political outrage, 2 diplomatic insults, and 1 very unfortunate exile. All from one kiss. Because in court, your lips didn't just belong to you. They were an extension of your family, your titles, your treaties. Kissing the wrong noblewoman could be interpreted as an offer, a claim, in some cases, even a challenge. And if you kissed a queen, well, that was either an honor reserved for men far above your pay grade, or an invitation to have your head quietly removed and mailed back to your estate. Take Queen Elizabeth, for example. The Virgin Queen had many suitors, many admirers, and many men who fancied themselves close enough to steal a kiss. Most of them received icy glares or polite reminders that England's monarch did not appreciate unsolicited mouth contact. But one courtier, the bold and hopelessly smitten Robert Devereux, once burst into her chamber unannounced and, depending on the version of the story, may have attempted an impromptu kiss. She slapped him hard and sent him away without a wig. He lost the rest of his head a few years later, though that was probably for other reasons. Kissing a monarch was also bound in rituals. In France, it was customary to kiss the cheek of royalty left, right, left again, but never the mouth. In Russia, it was more common to bow and kiss the foot or hem of a robe. And in the Habsburg courts, you might spend 10 minutes kissing everyone in the room except the person you actually cared about, because doing so directly would signal betrayal of another alliance. It was complicated. And all of this was before you even considered the layers of intrigue, spies passing messages through symbolic kisses, queens sending political signals by refusing to allow one, noblewomen using a public kiss to elevate a man's social standing or destroy his reputation by pretending it had happened at all. In this world, kissing wasn't an act of affection. It was a chess move, a diplomatic telegram, a power play in silk and satin. Even the setting mattered. A kiss in the garden meant one thing, a kiss in the ballroom another, a kiss during a masked ball, oh dear. Now you've gone and started a scandal. And yet, for all this complexity, kissing still happened. Secretly, recklessly, beneath tapestries, behind columns, in the shadows of cathedrals and antechambers. People kissed because they were human. And sometimes humans defy strategy. Even when they're wearing 5 layers of velvet and carrying a small kingdom's GDP on their heads. So tonight, as you rest your modern, wonderfully uncomplicated head on your pillow, remember this. In the royal courts of the 1500s, a kiss was never just a kiss. It was a gamble, a message, a plot twist with perfume. And if you ever find yourself time traveling to a courtly ball in 1560, maybe keep your lips to yourself. Or at the very least, ask first. You've survived the poisoned lips of court ladies, narrowly dodged a diplomatic crisis in the royal ballroom, and wisely declined a moonlit kiss from someone with visibly black teeth. But now, dear listener, let's dive into something even trickier than plague or politics. Etiquette. Because in the 1500s, kissing was not just dangerous, it was also confusing as hell. There were rules, and I don't mean casual, flexible, don't kiss your cousin rules. I mean unspoken social contracts that changed from country to country, court to court, and sometimes depending on whether someone was wearing their formal hat. Let's start with the greeting kiss, or osculum for those who enjoy Latin and stress-induced ulcers. In some European courts, it was customary to kiss someone upon greeting them. But where the cheek, the hand, the air near their ear, the floor near their robe, and how many times? France said 2, or maybe 3, or 4 if you were really enthusiastic or slightly intoxicated. Italy said once, maybe twice, but not if your families had a blood feud. Spain, you might kiss once, but you'd better have a good reason. England, you kissed hands if you were elegant, cheeks if you were brave, and lips if you were about to be fined or murdered. And woe betide the person who guessed wrong. Kissing the wrong part of the body wasn't just awkward, it could be scandalous. Imagine accidentally kissing someone's mouth when you meant to kiss their hand. It's not just a social faux pas, it's practically an engagement proposal, or a duel challenge, or an excommunication. And don't get me started on timing. Did you kiss upon arrival after being introduced, after the host drank their wine, after you'd confirmed nobody in the room was carrying disease, a dagger, or an overprotective older brother? Then there was status. You never kissed down in the social hierarchy. That would suggest familiarity, or pity, or an unwise attempt at romance with someone who could not afford shoes. But kissing up, that was expected if you did it correctly. If you kissed too enthusiastically, it was seen as ambition. Too briefly, disrespect. Too moist. Well, now you're just a pervert. There were even written etiquette manuals, yes, actual printed guides that outlined the mechanics of proper kissing. These books instructed young men on how long a kiss should last, how to stand during the process, no slouching, no leaning, no grabbing, and how to properly retreat afterward without looking like you had either enjoyed it too much or not enough. One Renaissance author advised young gentlemen to ensure that the lips are soft but firm, and the breath neither foul nor aggressive, which is still good advice, frankly. But he then goes on to say, "Do not dart the tongue, for this is the behavior of beasts." Sorry, France. Then, of course, came the matter of audience. A kiss in private, risky, sinful, potentially magical. A kiss in front of a crowd. Now it was symbolic. For example, in weddings, the kiss was often performed not for intimacy, but to signal the sealing of the union, like stamping a scroll or hammering the final nail in your marital coffin. At coronations, nobles would kiss the feet or the hand of the new monarch, often after waiting in line for hours while wearing 15 pounds of brocade. Kissing became a form of obedience, submission, flattery, even espionage. A well-placed kiss could get you a title. A mistimed one could get you booted from the castle and rebranded as a wandering juggler. But the most awkward rule of all: no repeated kissing, unless absolutely necessary. And that's right. 1 kiss was charming. 2 was acceptable. A 3rd kiss, now you were either desperate, suspicious, or French. And in some courts, repeat kissing was seen as a direct challenge to someone's honor or purity, even if you were married. So yes, kissing in the 1500s was a treacherous maze of rules, customs, gestures, and facial control. And what happened if you broke etiquette? Public shame, mostly, possibly fines, definitely gossip. Your name written in someone's diary with an alarming number of exclamation points. Or if you were in the wrong court at the wrong time, banishment. Because no one wanted to be the person who got kissed on the wrong cheek and then had to explain it to their bishop, their spouse, or their horse. So tonight, as you lie in bed free from the anxiety of choosing which cheek to lean toward, let your modern heart rest easy. You live in a time when a kiss is, most often, just a kiss. Not a contract. Not a crime. Not a catastrophic breach of etiquette that ends with you sleeping in a barn outside Florence. By now, you've kissed your way through legal loopholes, courtly disasters, plague-riddled lips, and enough etiquette rules to rival a royal chess match. So let's get to the juicy part. The part that makes modern teenagers giggle and historians sigh. Let's talk about French kissing before the French even claimed it. Because yes, dear listener, the act we now so eloquently call Frenching existed long before it had a name. In the 1500s, people didn't invent the deep, tongue-tangling style of kiss we associate with passion. They just didn't write about it much. At least, not in public. You see, the tongue was a scandalous thing. Useful for speech, obviously. Excellent for prayer. Passable for insulting your cousin. But to involve it in a kiss that was considered, well, let's say excessive, especially in a culture where most people's oral hygiene was one mild breeze away from total collapse. That didn't mean people didn't do it. They did. Oh, they absolutely did. In the shadows of bathhouses, in creaky bedrooms behind creakier taverns, in woods, orchards, stables, haylofts, monasteries. You didn't hear that from me. And sometimes right in the middle of festivals when the mead had done its job. But if they talked about it, they used metaphors, colorful ones, biblical ones. A 16th century poet might refer to lips meeting in whispered confessions, or a mingling of breath and spirit, or, my personal favorite, sharing the wind between hearts. Translation tongue was definitely involved. There are even medical texts written by doctors who were supposed to be talking about fevers and bowel movements that describe the dangerous exchange of humors via the mouth. Humors, in this case, meant bodily fluids, which is deeply unromantic, but also kind of confirms what was going on. And it wasn't just peasants and partygoers. Some royals and nobles were known for their enthusiasm. The Medici courts were notoriously steamy. French ambassadors in Italy often wrote letters back home describing the southern fashion of kissing, with astonishment and occasionally envy. And while England tried to keep a stiff upper lip literally and figuratively, there are bawdy plays and dirty poems that leave no doubt about the tongue's involvement in late-night courtship. Still, no one called it French kissing. That branding would come much later. Around the 20th century, when Americans decided that French people seemed to know an awful lot about kissing, cheese, and seduction, and slapped the label on with gusto. Ironically, the French themselves didn't use the term, they just called it kissing. But if you'd asked a serious, God-fearing citizen in 1500 whether deep kissing was acceptable. The answer would have been a firm non. They might have told you that such an act invited disease, lust, possession, or worse, emotional intimacy, a terrifying prospect in a marriage arranged via goat exchange. There were also concerns deeply scientific. Of course, that using the tongue in kissing could disturb the brain's vital spirits or flood the soul with temptation. One English cleric even suggested that the wet kiss is but a prelude to collapse. Which sounds dramatic until you remember that he probably wore 5 layers of wool in July and had never kissed anyone ever. Despite all this, it persisted. People just knew when not to mention it. You didn't kiss like that in public, not unless you wanted to be labeled a harlot, a libertine, or a traveling actor, basically the same thing in certain towns. You didn't kiss like that in church, or at court, or on your wedding day in front of your in-laws. But in private, that's another story entirely. There are letters private, smuggled, half-burnt, that describe kisses so deep I forgot my name, or tongues that danced in the dark, or the storm of your mouth inside mine. And while these lines were scandalous when discovered, they also give us a glimpse of something eternal. People have always wanted to kiss passionately, even when it was frowned upon, even when it was dangerous, even when it didn't have a name. So, what did they call it? They didn't, because the best kisses often go unnamed. They exist in candlelight, between breath and silence. In the stolen moment when everything else fades, and 2 people forget the rules, the risks, and the etiquette guides. They just kiss. Deeply, desperately, Frenchly. Before France even knew what it was famous for. So tonight, if you find yourself dreaming of a kiss, not just a polite peck, but a kiss with history, mystery, and maybe a slight scent of plague-era clove, lean in slowly. And if you hear a choir of medieval monks in the distance, maybe ease off the tongue. Just for safety. So you've made it through plague paranoia, diplomatic disasters, and the kiss that dared to involve the tongue. You've survived bad breath, courtly protocol, and flirtations that doubled as political suicide. But now, dear listener, we arrive at the truly sinister part of the 1500s kiss. The diseases. Not the dramatic ones, mind you. Not the plague or the sweating sickness, those had the decency to be quick. No. Tonight we delve into the slow, the rotting, the lingering curses that rode into Europe on the lips of sailors, mercenaries, and lovers with very poor impulse control. Let me introduce you to the French disease. Sounds fancy, doesn't it? It wasn't This was syphilis, the gift that no one wanted, wrapped in rashes, madness, and regret. And why was it called the French disease? You ask because when it first swept across Europe in the late 15th century, everyone blamed someone else. The Italians blamed the French blamed the Spanish, the English blamed everyone, and the disease itself, it blamed no one. It just spread through skin, through blood, and yes, through kissing. Now, officially, syphilis is most often transmitted through more intimate exchanges. But in the early stages, when the body is blooming with contagious ulcers, some of them located, rather delicately, on the lips, it could be passed by mouth-to-mouth contact, especially the kind of deep, prolonged kissing we discussed in the last episode. You remember the one with tongue and regret. The earliest outbreaks of syphilis were so aggressive, so horrifying, that they were believed to be divine punishment. Victims described pain so intense they begged for death. Their skin erupted in sores. Their noses collapsed. Their minds unraveled. And still, people kissed. Even worse, it wasn't just syphilis. Let's run through a few charming ailments, shall we? Scrofula, also known as the king's evil, because it was thought that a royal touch could cure it. Caused by tuberculosis bacteria, it created unsightly, oozing lumps in the neck. Was it spread by kissing? Not always. But if someone coughed in your face and then kissed your hand, congratulations. You've just added neck boils to your schedule. Diphtheria, a disease that coated the back of the throat in a thick, gray film and made breathing feel like inhaling soup through a sponge. Highly contagious through respiratory droplets, and often caught by children from adults who insisted on doting kisses. Truly, a bedtime story with extra phlegm. Herpes simplex, yes, that one. It didn't arrive with modernity. In fact, it's ancient. And while it may not have been lethal, in a time without antiviral creams or polite euphemisms, showing up at court with a lip blister was social death. Leprosy, by the 1500s. It wasn't as common as before, but still feared. And while it's not casually transmitted through a single kiss, in leper colonies and border villages, the stigma alone was enough to make someone deeply regret a moment of affection, especially if that affection left visible signs. It's worth noting that most diseases at the time were shrouded in myth and misunderstanding. Germ theory wouldn't arrive for centuries. Doctors believed that illness came from imbalanced humors, or bad air, or my favorite, divine misbehavior. So if you kissed someone and later developed a high fever and lost a toe, well, that was probably your fault for being morally suspicious. Naturally, some people tried to protect themselves. There were charms worn to prevent disease, a silver locket with dried herbs, a prayer stitched into clothing, a garlic clove tucked beneath the tongue like a spicy pacifier. But none of these were particularly effective when pressed face first into someone else's open sores. And yet, once again, people still kissed. They kissed in alleys, behind market stalls, in the back pews of churches. Some believed love would protect them. Others believed they had nothing left to lose. And some, no doubt, believed that whatever death was riding on their partner's breath, it was worth it. For one perfect moment of forgetting. Because that's the thing about dangerous kissing, it wasn't always stupid. Sometimes, it was brave. Imagine living in a world where half your friends had died of plague. The priest was warning you about sin, and your teeth ached from chewing week-old barley, and you still chose to kiss someone. To open your mouth, your soul, your already compromised immune system. That's not just romance. That's rebellion. So tonight, as you brush your teeth with fluoride and drink your filtered water and live in an era where diseases come with vaccine cards and prescription ads, spare a moment for the brave, reckless, pox-covered lovers of the 1500s. They died doing what they loved. Badly. Now, if you've made it this far past the poisoned lipstick, the legal lips, and the mouth-based medieval diseases, you may be thinking, surely it can't get worse. But oh, dear listener, it can always get worse. Because tonight, we arrive at one of the darkest, most paranoid chapters in kissing history, the age of the Inquisition. Yes, that Inquisition. The one with the robes, the torches, the interrogation rooms where questions were asked not with words but with instruments. A time when kissing the wrong person might get you condemned not just as sinful, but as heretical. And heresy, in the 1500s, was punishable by fire. Let's set the scene. You're in Spain, or Portugal, or parts of Italy or France, regions where the Catholic Church has teeth sharper than any king's, and the reach of a rumor is longer than any royal decree. The air is thick with incense and fear. People are watching. People are always watching. So you fall in love. Maybe he's a baker's apprentice. Maybe she's the daughter of a merchant. Maybe they smile at you during the procession for Saint whoever it is today, and you feel your heart do that thing it's not supposed to do in public. You meet in secret. You walk side by side, hands brushing. Eventually, one night, you kiss. And someone sees, or worse, thinks they saw. The next day, you're summoned, not by your parents, not by your priest, by the Inquisition. Because here's the thing during this period of moral hypervigilance, a kiss was never just about affection. It was potentially a sign of moral decay, of secret sin, of rebellion against the spiritual order. If the kiss crossed social boundaries, say, a Christian kissing a converted Jew or Muslim, it wasn't just frowned upon. It was criminal, a sign of religious contamination. Your kiss wasn't seen as love. It was seen as treason against God. And it wasn't just about who you kissed. It was how... Did you linger too long? Did your lips part? Was there passion? Congratulations. You might be harboring lustful thoughts. And lust, as every inquisitor with a torch and a Latin Bible will tell you, is the gateway drug to eternal damnation. Let's not forget witchcraft. That's right. If a kiss felt too intense, too enchanting, people might assume you were using magic. Especially if you were a woman. Especially if you were unmarried. Especially if you were beautiful or, worse, charming. There are trial records, actual documents where women were accused of bewitching men through kisses, that they stole his soul through her mouth, that his senses were clouded by her lips, that she spoke words of pleasure in the devil's tongue while pressing her mouth to his. Spoiler, she wasn't speaking devil. She was probably just French. But that didn't stop the punishments. Some were whipped, some were branded, some were imprisoned in convents, and some were burned. And still, people kept kissing. Because even in the face of persecution, repression, and a terrifyingly long list of sins that could be committed with a single breath, there was something irresistible about it. Kissing in the time of Inquisition was dangerous, which meant it was thrilling. Every stolen moment was a risk. Every whispered meeting behind cathedral walls, a gamble. Every kiss, a tiny revolution against a world that wanted mouths to be used only for prayer and silence. And people did get clever. They kissed under the guise of religious rituals. They kissed under veils. They kissed through poetry, sending love letters in the form of psalms. There are accounts of lovers confessing to one another in dark corners of the church, their mouths close enough to touch, voices low enough to tremble the air. One couple allegedly kissed while performing the act of washing each other's feet for Lent. Holy on the outside, steamy on the inside. And the Inquisition. It couldn't catch them all. So tonight, as you rest your head in a world where no one will burn you for a passionate peck behind the stairs, think of those who risked everything for a kiss. Not just their health, not just their reputation, but their souls. They kissed not because they were foolish. They kissed because it was human. And sometimes, being human was the greatest heresy of all. You've now survived kisses that spread disease, doomed reputations, angered inquisitors, and possibly melted someone's nose. So what could possibly be left? Tonight, dear listener, we enter the deadliest chamber of all, the political kiss. Because in the 1500s, your lips weren't just soft, they were strategic assets, and the wrong kiss could bring down a dynasty. To understand this, we must first abandon the modern notion of kissing as purely romantic or affectionate. In the Renaissance world, a kiss was a diplomatic act, a gesture that, depending on context, could signal alliance, submission, betrayal, ambition, or open rebellion. It's not just that a kiss meant something, it's that it meant everything. Consider the royal courts when two noble houses needed to affirm loyalty. A ceremonial kiss might be exchanged, often on the cheek, sometimes on the hand, occasionally on the lips, but never without purpose. It was a symbol of unity, trust, and shared interest, which made it a perfect tool for manipulation. Let's say you're a duke. You've got ambitions. A neighboring count's daughter has been rumored to inherit vast lands. At a banquet, you lean in ever so gently and kiss her gloved hand. It's innocent, polite, but witnessed by 50 people, including the king. Now the whispers begin. Did you see the duke kiss her? Are they aligned? Is he courting power by the next morning? You've either secured your future duchess or started a civil war, depending on who watched and how drunk they were. Even refusing a kiss was dangerous. There are accounts of ambassadors arriving in foreign courts and declining the expected kiss of welcome, whether out of pride, principle, or sheer ignorance of custom. The result: entire treaties collapsed. One Venetian envoy was nearly exiled for failing to kiss the French queen's cheek, which was interpreted not as forgetfulness, but as an intentional insult to all of France, which is a lot of pressure for a face peck. Now, if you think men were the only ones weaponizing kisses, think again. Court women, especially queens and noble ladies, were masters of the art. A kiss offered to the right man at the right time could elevate him politically, and a kiss offered to the wrong man at the wrong moment could destroy him. Imagine a queen leaning forward and placing the faintest kiss on a favored courtier's cheek, a gesture so subtle it might be missed, but not by the court, never by the court. Suddenly, the man is a topic of conversation, a target, a favorite. Power clings to his shoulders like perfume, and enemies begin sharpening their smiles. Catherine de' Medici, one of the most cunning political minds of the Renaissance, was rumored to use kisses like knives, small, elegant, and deadly. If she kissed you in court, it meant something. If she stopped kissing you, you were already politically dead. There are even whispers of lovers planted by queens or kings to gather secrets through affection, spies who use charm, body language, and yes, kisses to unlock treacherous gossip in the heat of passion. And this was considered a skill. In some elite circles, young noblewomen were trained in the art of courtly affection. They learned how to kiss in ways that flattered, intimidated, or seduced without seeming improper. A well-timed kiss could sway a vote, influence a policy, topple a rival. Because in a world where words could be denied and letters could be burned, a kiss was a message no one could unsee. Even the absence of a kiss told stories. Entire diplomatic crises began because someone expected a kiss and didn't get one. Ambassadors wrote furious letters home. Marriages were delayed. At least one actual war, was partly blamed on the withholding of a ceremonial kiss between two nobles at a peace summit. The insult stuck. The alliance broke. Kissing, in this context, was language, and the elite spoke it fluently. So if you were an observer at a court ball in 1580, you'd do well not to focus on the music or the wine. You'd want to watch the lips. Who kissed whom, who hesitated, who leaned in, who pretended to forget, and who, perhaps, kissed with a little too much sincerity. So tonight, as you curl up in your relatively apolitical pajamas, be thankful. You don't need to worry that a kiss at a dinner party might lead to a change in parliamentary policy, or that a cheek peck could cost you your ancestral lands. Your kisses are yours. Use them wisely. Or recklessly. Just know that once upon a time, they were sharper than swords. By now, dear listener, your sleep is surely trembling somewhere between curiosity and mild historical paranoia. And yet, there is still one darker corner to explore. One final, fatal twist in our tour through the lips of the Renaissance. Tonight, let us talk about lovers who kissed to kill. Because while most people feared the kiss for its social consequences, religious implications, or medical risks, there was another, more deliberate danger: the intentional use of a kiss as a weapon. Yes, a literal kiss of death. Let's begin with the legends. There are stories, some exaggerated, others disturbingly plausible, of assassins trained to kill using only their mouths. They carried venom on their lips, concealed in clever ways: waxy salves laced with deadly nightshade, lipstick infused with arsenic, perfumes that weren't applied around the mouth, but into it. The kiss, in these stories, wasn't an accident. It was the final act of a very intimate assassination. Poisoning by mouth was attractive to those who sought discretion. No blades, no blood, just a moment of tenderness, a soft sigh, and then collapse. There are tales of courtesans dispatched by noble houses to seduce and kill political rivals. Women kissed in moonlit gardens. Men died in candlelit beds. And, chillingly, no one suspected anything until the autopsy, if such a thing was even performed. Of course, some of these stories veer into the mythic. The idea of a poison kiss became so popular in literature and court gossip that it was almost fashionable. There were rumors of Venetian noblewomen keeping jars of death balm in silver cases, to be applied if their hearts were broken beyond repair. If they could not have him, no one would. But not all stories were fiction. In 1545, an Italian nobleman died under mysterious circumstances after a kiss shared with his mistress who, as it turned out, had previously been accused of poisoning her second husband. No charges were brought, but the rumors were damning, and the idea stuck. The weaponized kiss wasn't always lethal in body, but it could be in reputation. Take the scandal of François de Montmorency, a French nobleman whose affair with a married woman became court gossip after the couple was spotted sharing an unusually intimate farewell. Within weeks, the woman's husband had challenged François to a duel, and François, in turn, had fled the country. The kiss, in this case, was not just romantic indiscretion, it was social suicide. And in a world where honor was as valuable as land, such a kiss could kill a career, a family, a future. Then there were those who kissed knowing they were contagious. Yes, it sounds dramatic, but syphilis, as we've discussed, was rampant and often stigmatized. In the rare cases where someone realized they were infected and chose not to warn their lover, the result was slow, silent destruction. Some later trials describe this as intentional transmission, the 16th century equivalent of biological warfare. One woman in Paris was said to have sought vengeance on the man who betrayed her by gifting him a disease with her mouth. There's no record of what happened to her, but in court poetry, she lived on as the Dame au baiser noir, the Lady of the Black Kiss. And let us not forget the classic The Lover's Suicide Kiss, the double death. Think Romeo and Juliet, but darker, older, more baroque. In some tragic tales, lovers parted by war, politics, or arranged marriage agreed to die together via poisoned lips. The method varied, sometimes a shared cup, sometimes a slow-acting tincture on the tongue. They would kiss one final time and fall together. These acts were often romanticized after the fact, their names stitched into dirges and woven into tapestries. But in truth, they were often the last gasp of people trapped in systems that gave them no say over their lives, only their deaths. So you see, the kiss could be many things in the 1500s. A scandal, a sin, a surprise. But sometimes it was a weapon. Sharp as a blade, soft as a sigh, and infinitely more memorable. So tonight, if someone in your dreams leans in with sultry eyes and mysterious perfume, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, do they smell like almonds? Can you feel a tingling on your lips? Is this kiss too perfect? If so, maybe step back. Or lean in anyway. After all, what is history but a long list of people who knew better and kissed anyway at this point? Dear listener, it's a miracle anyone in the 1500s kissed at all. Between the deadly plagues, powdered poisons, political backstabbing, and religious condemnation, you'd think people would have kept their mouths to themselves and settled for firm handshakes and long, judgmental eye contact. And yet, somehow, kissing endured. In fact, by the late 1500s and into the early 1600s, something curious began to happen. Kissing slowly started to evolve from a dangerous gamble into something approaching tolerable. Not exactly safe, but survivable. So tonight, as you rest your head and feel ever so grateful for modern antibiotics, let's talk about how the kiss began its long journey towards social rehabilitation. To start, we must look to science, or at least the version of science that existed at the time, which was often 1 part observation, 2 parts alchemy, and several hundred parts guesswork. As anatomical studies advanced and public health slowly took form, physicians began to notice that kissing didn't always kill people. They also realized that disease spread through more than just sinful affection. Sometimes it came from bad water, or fleas, or the fact that nobody had washed their socks since the coronation of Henry VIII. There were even a few brave souls who defended kissing. One 1599 Italian physician wrote a short treatise arguing that moderate, gentle kissing between clean persons may strengthen the spirits and gladden the humors, which is early modern medical speak for maybe stop being so dramatic. Hygiene improved, slowly. Tooth powder recipes evolved, fewer bricks, more herbs. The invention of the toothbrush in China, but eventually copied by Europe, helped make breath less fatal. Perfumes, while still drowning in musk and mystery, began to incorporate citrus oils that masked more than just the scent of sin. Fashion also helped. The enormous ruffs and collars of the Elizabethan era, while entirely ridiculous, functioned as a kind of built-in social distancing device. You couldn't get close enough to someone's lips without navigating a lace obstacle course, which gave everyone time to think about their choices Etiquette books began to soften, too. By the early 1600s, kissing wasn't always a scandal. It was still a delicate dance, but more accepted especially among married couples and within theatrical performances. Plays like those of Shakespeare included kisses on stage, and while some audiences gasped, others swooned. The kiss was becoming part of storytelling, romance, character. But perhaps the biggest shift came from literature. The printing press made books accessible to more than just the upper classes. And what did people read? Love stories, poems, scandalous tales with dramatic declarations and dramatic air kisses. The more kissing was romanticized, the more people wanted to do it. Writers described lips like rose petals, mouths like gates to paradise, kisses that healed hearts and sealed fates. In these pages, kissing was no longer a social gamble, it was an emotional truth. People began to believe in the kiss, not just as a bodily action, but as a symbol of something deeper. And so, kissing became almost safe. Almost, Because let's not kid ourselves, it was still a petri dish of human drama. Syphilis didn't go away. Gossip didn't stop. There were still kings who died mid-smooch and queens who used kisses like political currency. But the tide was turning. Public kissing didn't always result in shame. Romantic kisses weren't always censored. By the early 17th century, kissing was, dare I say, fashionable. Still risque. Yes, but no longer synonymous with catastrophe. It was a little less poison, a little more poetry. And yet, the memory of those dangerous days lingered. It gave the kiss a kind of weight, a kind of legacy. It reminded lovers that something as simple as pressed lips once carried consequences far beyond the heart. Which, in a way, makes it even more beautiful. Because when something can destroy you, but doesn't, that's power. That's magic. That's romance. So tonight, if you fall asleep and dream of kissing someone in a Renaissance garden, with violins in the distance and moonlight on your skin, remember you're part of a long, stubborn tradition. One that began in fear and survived because people just couldn't help themselves. And so, dear listener, here we are. You've traveled with me across 5 centuries of smooching through courtly traps, plague sores, religious fury, and poison-tipped pouts. You've tiptoed past inquisitors, dodged syphilitic soldiers, and possibly kissed a French diplomat with diplomatic consequences. It's only fair we end where the kiss has landed today. The modern kiss. Soft, sweet, mostly safe. At least compared to, well, everything we've just covered. Because now, in the comfort of the 21st century, kissing has transformed from the complicated chess move of aristocrats and secret lovers into something so casual that teenagers do it behind vending machines after school, and no one gets excommunicated. Usually. But that journey wasn't easy. The kiss had to work very hard to scrub centuries of stigma off its metaphorical face. It took revolutions, romantic and political. It took literature, art, and science. It took public education campaigns and the invention of mouthwash. Seriously, let's take a moment to thank mouthwash. You are the unsung hero of modern romance. And now, a kiss is a greeting in some cultures, a polite hello in others, a shared joy, a stolen moment, a way to end a date or start a relationship, or awkwardly explain to your friend why you leaned in and misread the vibe. It's part of weddings, birthdays, reunions, and every romantic comedy ever made. Sure, there are still risks. You could catch a cold. You could ignite a situationship. You could accidentally kiss someone who just ate tuna. But in general, no one's dying. No one's being dragged before a tribunal. No one's noble house is falling because they kissed the wrong cheek in the wrong courtyard at the wrong hour. It's a miracle. And yet, in this age of emojis and swipe rights and highly curated dating profiles, the kiss still holds power. Because for all our modernity, for all our science and apps and mint-flavored chapsticks, the kiss still means something. It still pauses the world. It still draws the breath from your lungs and makes your brain short-circuit for a moment. It still carries that old spark, that dangerous history. You feel it, don't you? The ghost of every forbidden kiss in a candlelit hallway. The echo of every kiss that was worth the scandal, the risk, the punishment. The memory of lips that defied rules, kings, and sometimes logic. Every time you kiss someone, you're participating in a ritual older than most nations, older than forks, older than soap. And yes, now it's cute. Now it's soft. But it wasn't always... It was once rebellion. It was once medicine. It was once warfare. And now, it's yours. So tonight, as you pull the blanket over your shoulder and your thoughts start to fade into dreams, remember this: your lips are part of history. Glorious, messy, ill-advised history. And every kiss you give or don't give is part of a long, strange, very kissable legacy. May your breath be fresh. May your timing be good. And may you never, ever accidentally insult a 16th century duchess with too much tongue. Sleep well, brave kisser. Good evening. One last time. Tonight, as you settle into the final moments of this long, strange, deliciously inappropriate journey through kissing in the 1500s, let me offer a gentle closing thought, a soft landing, a whisper, perhaps, on the cheek of your imagination. Because what began as a simple question, why was kissing dangerous in the 1500s, turned out to be far more than a curiosity. It was a portal, one that took us deep into a world of danger and desire, etiquette and espionage, broken hearts and broken noses. It was never just about the kiss. It was about what the kiss meant. In a time before fluoride, before democracy, before hand sanitizer, the kiss was everything affection, offense, offer, outrage, a greeting, a gamble, a biological risk and a political maneuver. Sometimes it was a miracle. Sometimes it was a mistake. But it was never, ever boring. You learned how one innocent peck could spark a scandal that toppled a noble house. How the wrong cheek at the wrong angle could insult an entire empire. You peeked behind the ruffled collars and perfumed sleeves of kings and courtesans, saw how lips were wielded like daggers, and sometimes how they literally were daggers, dipped in poison and disguised as love. You've heard how inquisitors saw the kiss as a sin, how queens used it as a weapon, how desperate lovers used it to say what the church would not allow them to speak. And still, people kissed. Despite the risk, despite the rules, despite the danger, because some part of the human spirit has always been drawn to connection. We are creatures of skin and breath and hope, of laughter behind the garden wall, of letters sealed with more than wax, of hands that tremble not from fear but from longing. And in the centuries since, not much has changed, has it? Yes, kissing is safer now, cleaner, backed by mouthwash and a less aggressive understanding of germs. But the meaning lingers. A kiss is still a threshold, a choice, a message that can say more in one soft press than 100 sonnets ever could. So if this little bedtime series has done anything besides keep you up Googling early modern lip ulcers, I hope it's reminded you that history isn't just about battles and treaties and crowns. Sometimes, it's about the smallest, quietest moments. The ones with closed eyes and held breath. The ones that make your heart jump before your brain catches up. The ones that risk everything just for a second of connection. And as you drift into sleep now, perhaps you'll dream of a candlelit ballroom, of velvet gloves and forbidden glances, or maybe a quiet orchard where two souls kiss like no one's watching, even though they absolutely are. Wherever your mind wanders tonight, may it go with a smile and slightly puckered lips. Because history has many voices, but none quite as dangerous or tender or absurdly human as a kiss. Good night.